afternoon, my conscious co-creators. Welcome to another edition of the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. I'm very, very pleased that you are all here with me today. Thank you for tuning in, whether it's here on the live stream on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, or if you're listening to the replay after the fact. I so appreciate you being with us today. Um, Today is my regularly scheduled show with no guest. Last week I had no guest because my guest didn't arrive. So you're getting a double dose of just Sam for the month. But fear not, we have plenty of guests for the rest of the month. And actually, I'm kind of booked out until like November, I think. So we got a lot of great shows coming up for you. Hope you caught last week's show. That was it was an off-the-cuff kind of fun show, but today I actually have a topic planned, so we'll see how today goes. But I would really love your comments, your feedback. Please let me know what you think about anything I talk about or any questions you might have, and let's do this show together. All right. So I am starting off the show, as I have been for quite a while now, with a blog post that I wrote. I'm just kind of taking these in order from a couple of years ago. And this one is entitled, When We Can't Feel Our Own Goodness, It is Time to Ask Someone Else What They See. There's an interesting dance that we do, one where we go to extremes. We may find it hard to acknowledge our gifts one day, and the next day we tell people how great we are. It is a common occurrence for those of us who do not have a balanced sense of self. For it is truly a challenge to see ourselves clearly, to be objective about how good we are at something. Or perhaps we think we are better at it than we really are. Sometimes it can just be a swing in our mood that takes us into judgment about ourselves. We take a failure as a sign that we are not good people or that we are not special. Yet if we ask others what they see in us, we get a totally different perspective. For they are not in the middle of the emotional storm about ourselves, only about themselves. So someone else can see clearly that we are great at one thing or only mediocre at something else. When we ask our friends for the truth about us, the responses we receive can be quite enlightening. For other people can see that we are smart, kind, or capable in an instant. Yet when we look in the mirror, we only see all of our faults. When we get stuck in that pattern of self-criticism, it can be a good reminder to ask someone else what they see in us. What do they see as our greatest qualities? Where do they see that we can improve? This is not to say that a close friend might not go soft on us to cheer us up if they feel we are upset. Yet if we are in a good mood when we ask, we are likely to get some quite interesting responses. So when we are doubting ourselves, unsure of ourselves, or just plain can't see anything of value in ourselves, it is a good reminder to ask someone else. And if we cannot feel what they say about us, then it is time to take their words and repeat them to ourselves out loud, then in front of a mirror, saying their words like we really mean it. even if we don't feel it in the moment, especially when we don't feel it in the moment. Yeah, so this blog post really came from this exercise that we did in a session once, where I believe the facilitator had us write down like all of our, what we saw as all our positive traits and all our negative traits. And then they had this go to somebody. Um, I think we all kind of knew each other a little bit, but ask the other people in the room what they saw as our good traits. And it was so enlightening to hear the feedback from people in the room, how much other people could see good traits in someone else, but they could not see it in themselves. And to me, that just really goes to the heart of, we don't honor ourselves. We don't see ourselves clearly. And the thing that was so interesting is sometimes the things that people thought they were really good at, the other people in the room could see improvement, could see the need for improvement, could see that there was something more to happen there. So there was never this sort of balanced view of ourselves. And it wasn't just true for one person, it was true for everybody in the room. And so that really got me thinking. Because other people are a real resource to us, yet we often do not take advantage of that resource. And because we're so in the middle of our own lives, we don't see what other people see. We do not have an unbiased or an emotional detachment to how we truly show up in the world. And this is one of the reasons why working with a facilitator, a guide, a mentor is so important. Because when we work with a mentor, our mentor can see things in us that we do not see ourselves. And our mentor can see our strong points and our weak points. And so when we are working with someone who can see us truly for who we are and not just for who we think we are, it gives us a very different perspective on where we are in our process and how we show up in life, on what really works for us and what doesn't. So, I mean, it's something that I've known for many, many years, that working with a coach, a mentor, a guide, somebody who can see us as we truly are and not as we think we are, is one of the most valuable things we can do. And that's why if you look at like most successful people, they don't just have one coach, they have a dozen coaches for each different area in their life. They have someone that advises them on finance. They have someone who advises them on physical health. They have someone who advises them on mental health. They have someone who advises them on their business. They have someone that advises them on relationships. I mean, there's just so much. So And so I take these two things together and I realize that we really never have an unbiased view of ourselves. Now, sometimes, maybe because of past trauma or how we were raised, our view might be completely negative and completely negative in a very unbalanced way. Or if we're a narcissist, it can be unbalanced in a completely positive way. And the truth is, whenever there are those extremes in how we view ourselves, then that's a real key that that's not accurate. That the truth is always somewhere in the middle. That the truth is we're both good and bad. There's always room for improvement, and there are places that we've done incredibly well. But we have a hard time seeing that about ourselves because we're in the middle of it, because we're emotionally attached to these stories running around in our head about how good we are at something or how bad we are at something. And so to get out of our own heads, the simplest, easiest, most direct way is to ask someone else. Ask someone who knows us really well. And there are people out there who know us better than we know ourselves. Absolutely. So I guess this blog post is just a calling out to those people who read it to look at, when you're really feeling bad about yourself, that is a great time to look for other people's opinion, to ask your closest friends. Now, look, I'm not saying you should go out and ask someone who's abusive, or someone who doesn't like you, or someone who doesn't care about you. But ask someone who knows you well, who you know is going to be supportive, and ask them, what do they see? And it doesn't even have to be about maybe a particular thing that you're feeling bad about. It could be, they could say, you're wonderful at something else. Like maybe you have kids and maybe you did something and you felt like, oh no, I shouldn't have said that to my son or daughter or my child. And so you're feeling bad about your parenting skills. So you ask a friend, someone else, just what do they see in you? And they may know nothing about your parenting skills and they won't say anything about your parenting skills, but they may talk about how you're such a good friend and they may talk about how you're always there for them and how you always stand up for them. And so then that view of this sort of aspect of yourself that's in alignment, that suddenly offsets this negative feeling of like, oh my God, I can't believe what I did to my kids. And at the same time, if you think, well, I'm a great parent, I've been doing wonderful things, da da da, you may want to ask maybe another parent who's a friend of your kids, one of your kids' friends' parents. What do they see about you in terms of parenthood? They may say, well, you're really good at some things, but you really are too hard on your kid, or you're too easy on your kid, or whatever they may say. And look, I'm using about being a parent as an example. Please extrapolate it to anything, to work, to personal relationships, to intimate relationships, to finances, to health. It could be any aspect. What do they see about you? Because inevitably, what they will say will shock you. because they will notice something about yourself that we take completely for granted. Like, it's just the way we are. It's nothing we even put any effort into. It's just sort of how we naturally show up in life. So we don't think anything of it, but someone else sees it and goes, oh my God, that's like such a wonderful quality. You're so good at that. And you're like, really? And we have no clue. We had no idea, because for us, it was just natural. But another person can see it as something very special because it's not natural for a lot of people. So this is why asking someone who's outside of your internal world, what do they see in you, can be so powerful. And if you don't believe me, and that's okay, you don't have to believe me, try it sometime. Go and talk to some people and ask them, hey, what do you see in me? Just at random times, random people. It's a great exercise. Even people who don't know you that well. Even if they've just seen you on Zoom, ask and see what they say. The answers might really, really surprise you. So that's my blog post for the show. It's entitled, When We Can't Feel Our Own Goodness, It Is Time to Ask Someone Else What They See. And you can find that, of course, at my blog, which you can find on talkradio.nyc/blog, or on my personal branded website, theconsciousconsultant.com. And, if you want to ask me about it, you want to give me feedback about this blog post, please email me at sam@theconsciousconsultant. I would love to hear from you all. I would love if you can even comment on the live stream, what you thought of it. Any feedback is always very helpful. All right, we're going to go take a quick break. And when we come back, going to dive into today's topic, which is why flexibility is a superpower. And this is something that I've been working on for a long time now. If I would say for like in earnest, the last 10 years. And I even have recent examples, very recent examples of how flexibility really is a superpower and why it's so good, and how being flexible can really serve us. So I hope you'll stay tuned for this episode for that. I would love to hear your comments, your questions all around flexibility, and even anything tangentially related to it. But first, we're going to take this break. So everyone, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We do this every Thursday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, right here on TalkRadio.nyc and all over social media and on all the podcasting platforms. And we will be right back with the rest of our show in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on TalkRadio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on TalkRadio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on TalkRadio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on TalkRadio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. Thank you all for being with us today. I see loyal listener Sanaya. Sanaya, we have to get together soon. So good to see you on the show today. Welcome. And she says, welcome the honest opinion, always room for enlightenment and change. Very good, Sanaya. Yes, there's always room for improvement and change. You know, the Japanese have this concept of Tony Robbins calls it kanai, constant and never-ending improvement. And, you know, it doesn't have to be big, it can be a little improvement. But today we're talking about improvement around flexibility. So why is flexibility such a big deal? Well, you know, I don't really see people talking a lot about how flexibility really serves us in our life. And I just felt like this is a topic I haven't touched upon. I haven't really talked about all that much, but it's something that I have learned to live with, and I feel I'm pretty good with it. And for those of you that know astrology, I'm kind of I have a lot of earth signs. You know, although I'm an Aquarius Pisces cusp, so I have air and water, a lot of water, I think, in my chart, but I also have some earth signs that kind of like I like end up someplace and I like just stay there. You know, I don't like moving a lot. Yeah, I've been living in the place I'm living now for the last oh God, how many? Over I think 19 years. And before that, the place I lived in, then I lived in for 14 years. So, you know, I don't, you know, there's some people I know like every 2 or 3 years, they're moving to a different place. That's not me. So I do not naturally like to change on a whim. My wife, on the other hand, and even though she's a Taurus, which is an earth sign, she actually is as you know, must have a lot of other things in her chart because she's very flexible. She's always like changing like that on a whim. Um, and so I really, about 10 years ago, when I started doing the ceremonial work that I do, I found the facilitator I was working with was very flexible, and you could never pin him down and you know, say one thing and then things wouldn't work out. And it was very frustrating in the beginning. But I learned in those first 2, 3 years about really how to embrace flexibility. And then over the years, I really had to put into practice this idea of flexibility. And there's a certain key to really being able to embrace flexibility that I think a lot of people miss. And I'll let you know what that is later in the show. But it was something that I learned kind of the hard way. So why is flexibility a superpower? So here's the thing. When we are too rigid, when things always have to go a certain way, and we're not flexible with our plans, with what we're looking to do, with what's going on, it doesn't leave much room for the magic of life to get in there and surprise us. Now, there have been a lot of surprises in my life, some wonderful, some not so wonderful. The fact that I'm doing this show and I run TalkRadio.nyc, was a big surprise to me. And yeah, I've been running it now 14 years, but like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if anyone had told me like this is what I'd be doing today, I would have thought they're nuts. And many of you have heard me tell this story on the network before, how I met Giorgio and he decided to become a Buddhist monk, and I thought I'd help him sell him business. Instead, I ended up buying it with my wife. And it was a matter of saying yes to life. I've talked about, saying yes to life, but to say yes to life, we really got to be flexible because life brings us stuff all the time that we don't expect. And if you look at nature, I love looking at nature for clues and hints about how to live a good life. And you see, nature is very flexible. If you just look at how plants grow in the wild, they don't just grow in a straight line. I mean, there are some, like certain cactuses grow straight up. But if you look at most plants, they twist and turn and they come up this way and that way, and they go to where the sunshine is. Or they go around the rocks and they climb up the sides of trees. I mean, plants do all kinds of weird things. Animals too, especially insects. You ever notice how like insects, they go from here to there? Like insects work together, especially ants. Like they'll go in straight lines. They're very good at working together. But if they come across a block, they go around it. They come across something and they're up, above, below, around, sideways. Nature is inherently flexible because nature is constantly changing. Nature is not static. Nature is not linear. So that should tell us something. That should be a little bit of an indication of like if we pay true attention to nature, that maybe there's a lesson there for us. And so being flexible can really serve us in life because life can bring us amazing coincidences that we never could have imagined. Like perhaps someone invites us to a party last minute and we had other plans, but we didn't really want to do the other plans. So if we honor ourselves, we change our plans and we go with our friends to the party and we have a great time. We meet amazing people and maybe even create lifelong friendships out of it. You just never know. And that's the thing. You don't know where the future will lead. And that's why one of the reasons why flexibility is so important. And I'll just give you also a quick example. Something that happens not on a regular basis, but once in a while. For those of you who were tuning in last week, I was supposed to be interviewing someone. Actually, someone who we had rescheduled because he got sick the first time. And I was really looking forward to having him on the show, and he never showed up. So guess what? I had to do a show on my own. I had to be flexible and find something to talk about that would be interesting. And so because I'd recently been to the Horizons conference here in New York City, I thought there were some really interesting stories and interesting things I got from it. So I spent the show, talking about going to that conference. I'm just curious for people who listened, even if you're not into psychedelics, like, was that an interesting show? Did you learn something? Did you get something out of it? Were there any like, oh, really? Like something you didn't know? Let me know, because that feedback would be very valuable. But you see, when you do a live show, you have to be able to be flexible and think on your feet and roll with things because sometimes Look, I've been doing this show for 14 years. Out of those 14 years, how many times have people not shown up? Maybe once or twice a year. Not a lot, but it happens once in a while. But let's just say twice a year at most. Over 14 years, that's 28 times. I've had to be flexible about my topic, about doing a show by myself instead of interviewing someone. And so I had to learn to embrace flexibility, whether I wanted to or not, because that's life. That's the way life is. All right. So I'm just beginning to dive into this superpower known as flexibility. And when we come back, I'll bring some more examples and hopefully be able to highlight for you, my listeners, how you can really honor flexibility and still do what you need to get done. Where do we find that balance between flexibility and consistency? And yes, I eventually will get to what's the real key to being flexible. What's the one thing that will make the biggest difference to help us to be flexible? And we'll get into all of that after this next commercial break. So everyone, please stay tuned. You're listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. We'll be right back after this.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on TalkRadio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on TalkRadio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
And welcome back to the Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity. And this episode is all about why flexibility is a superpower. And, I've been talking about how life brings us different things at different times. And flexibility really is a superpower. And I'll give you another example, a very recent example. I'm working on putting together sort of a special invitation-only ceremonial experience in the Hamptons this summer. A woman who I got connected to, and then it turned out we had multiple connections, has a house in the Hamptons, and she's like, I'd love to have you come out and do what you do, and with this other person. And I'm like, okay, sure, great. And when we started looking at it, there was sort of one kind of arrangement. She was going to participate, not charge us, all this stuff. And then she shifted and changed, and she's like, well, I'm a little nervous. I really don't want, I want to just be there holding space the first night. So I can, can I charge you a land fee and still do it, and we'll see how it goes. And would have been quite easy to just say, no, we're not doing it. That's not the way we originally started. We you know that's not what we agreed on. If you had said this in the beginning, we wouldn't have done it, blah, blah, blah. It would have been really easy to be rigid and to say, you know what? No. But, I sat down with my wife and talked about it, and we went through it. And by not being so rigid and being flexible, we negotiated with her, and we found sort of a middle ground that works for both of us, for everyone involved. And so we're moving forward with this retreat that, could be a really good thing for me. Whereas if I had been rigid and not flexible and had been like, no, you're changing the deal on me. No, we can't do this. And no, it can only be this way. And I'm not saying that, there's no judgment about whether she was right or wrong for changing it, about how she feels about things. No, it doesn't, there's no judgment around it. It's just a noticing of what happened. And so it's kind of, if I had been rigid, I would have been cutting off my nose to spite my face, as my mom used to say, because I only would have been hurting myself by sort of cutting myself off from a possibility, even though it wasn't what we originally agreed upon. So there's always a give and take. There's always something we have to evaluate for ourselves of like, oh, things are changing. Do I really want to stay with this or not? And I'm not saying we have to be flexible about everything all the time. No, there's a balance to it. There's a reasonableness to it. However, again, it's really important to see what shows up for us and to really feel into, is this right for us? And that being flexible, it can really serve us in so many ways. And by being too rigid, we can miss out on opportunities. And another example, something that happened last summer, this is more sort of something I experienced tangentially, but it was really actually more about my wife, where we were out in Colorado. We were house sitting, working virtually, from afar. And she got a message from her niece that her sister was just diagnosed with cancer and was about to go for treatment in China. And so she had to decide what she was going to do. Now, if she had been rigid, she would have been like, okay, I have to wait till we get back home. I have to figure out into time, and then I'll come to China and see her. But she sat with it for a day or two, and then she really came to, no, I have to go there now. And so we changed plane tickets, we arranged things, got her a ticket to China. She left Colorado. I stayed because we had this commitment to doing these house sitting and watching people's pets for them. She came back to New York for a day, next day left for China and spent a month in China. She actually, when she left for China, she didn't know how long she was going to go there for. And she said, I just don't want to regret anything. I don't ever want to, at some point in the future, look back and say, oh, I should have been there for my sister. So she really embraced flexibility and embraced having to go and be there. And what happened was, and it was really quite interesting, while she was there, she was basically just going to see her sister when she was in the hospital, and they released her and she was home. But her sister didn't always have the strength to see her every day. So every day she had to be flexible about, like, get up, see what doing for the day. Was she going to see her sister or not? If she's not, what is she going to do? And she really had space for herself. And because of the time difference, she couldn't see any of her clients. So she took a month off from work. She read, she's in a different environment. I mean, did she see friends? Yeah, but she couldn't really plan to see her friends until towards the end to see whether she would even have the time to be able to, because if something happened with her sister, she might have to run to the hospital or run to her sister's house to see her at last minute. And then I had to also be flexible because I was expecting to be in Colorado with her for 3 weeks. And in less than a week, she left. And so for me, I mean, was it unpleasant? I mean, I would have preferred not to be all by myself. I mean, Colorado was beautiful. I loved it. I would love to go back to Colorado. Being without her there was a little challenging for me, but I also knew it was very important for her to go. And, we kept in touch, and, we talked, every day, every other day after a while. But it gave her some very precious and valuable time. It gave her time with her sister and her family, whom she hadn't seen for a few years. And it gave her time to be with herself. And when she came back, I could see she had really shifted in some ways. And that trip for her, in some ways, was very much a gift. But if she hadn't had been flexible enough to drop everything and go, could have been a very different story. So flexibility can serve us in so many different ways, not just in pleasant situations, but even in unpleasant situations. So flexibility is something that can really help us to take the most out of a specific situation. I'm sure some of you listening today have had to deal with that. I'm sure some of you have had those situations that something popped up and you just had to go. You had to change. You had to cancel plans last minute. It happens to all of us sometimes. So being flexible is recognizing that, yeah, sometimes that happens. Now, look, this does not mean that we should be flaky and we should never live up to commitments and we should never be on time and all that other stuff. No, it just means that we need to honor what's right in the moment, and to be flexible about a situation. So I would love to hear your comments. I got one more section. I haven't spoken yet about what's the real key to flexibility and what will make flexibility so much easier for everyone if you can embrace this. So I do hope that you'll stay with me. Please post your comments in the live streams. Let me know, is being flexible a challenge for you, or does it something that come naturally? Has flexibility served you in any situation, or has it not served you in some situations? I'd be curious. Let me know. So, you are listening to the Conscious Consultant Hour. It's the only one. And we will come right back in just a moment and wrap this all up and give you the key to unlock the superpower that is flexibility. Stay with us.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Broncu, host of The Hard Skills on TalkRadio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on TalkRadio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on TalkRadio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
And welcome back. So we've been talking about how flexibility is a very important superpower. And my engineer writes, how a couple of his roommates are going to be moving out at the end of the lease, and him and his other roommates have to figure out what they're going to do. So, got to be flexible with living situations too. Flexible with jobs. Flexible with business, flexible with relationships. Being flexible can really, really serve us, because when we're flexible, then we can really take advantage of a situation when something presents itself. Whereas if we're too stuck and no, it has to be this way and that way, and I can only do this and I can only do that, we miss out on some great, great opportunities. There is a key. There is a key to unlock this superpower, which is flexibility. And that key is non-attachment. That key is not being attached to the outcome of a situation. Because when we're attached to the way things need to look and need to work, then we're stuck. Then we start to get rigid. Then we're not open to the myriad of possibilities that life can bring to us and offer to us. So flexibility is a real superpower. But to cultivate that superpower, we truly need to learn to detach from how things need to look. We need to not micromanage the universe. Because if we're too rigid, if we're too attached, too inflexible, then we miss tremendous opportunities, and we miss the chance to really thrive in a new situation, because we don't know where any of this is going to take us. And indeed, I think the pandemic was a big lesson in this, because if you looked at the year 2020 and 2021, The people who thrived and did the best in that unsettling time were the people who were able to be flexible and shift their business models overnight. We went from a radio station that operated in person in our studio in Midtown over a long weekend to a virtual one, to one where all of the hosts could do the show from their home and all their guests could be wherever they are. And you know what happened because I was flexible enough to make that change? And it was a change I had resisted for a number of years. People had asked me about doing shows virtually and remotely for quite a while before that, but I always resisted it because I felt the quality of the audio wasn't good enough. But what happened because I was flexible enough to not stay too stuck in what I thought was the way of doing things? We grew. 2021 was the best year ever for Talking Alternative, for TalkRadio.nyc. We had more programs than we had ever had on the station before. Look around. Look at the people you know who had to completely change their businesses in 2020. How did they do in 21 and 22 and 23 and this year? My guess is, regardless of whether they're in business for themselves or maybe they're employees, that if they were flexible enough to change, they actually thrive. But those people who were too rigid and too stuck, and it's like, no, I can't do my business that way. They refused to adapt until they were just completely forced to. They didn't do so well. I know a number of people who their whole business was doing live in-person events, and suddenly they couldn't do that anymore. Was doing live speaking events, and suddenly all those speaking events disappeared overnight. And those who could embrace going online, they did much, much better than those who didn't. I feel like eventually everybody opened up to it. I feel like everyone kind of got the message, and now, even if you're not 100% virtual, you're at least hybrid. There's a virtual component to almost every business now, except for something like a restaurant, although now you can order from a restaurant on your phone and it will be delivered while the food's still hot. But what I noticed is those people really embrace the change, they thrive. And now, what's the wave that we all have to be flexible about? Artificial intelligence. Those people who are embracing the use of artificial intelligence, in general, not always, are doing better than those that aren't. And we are just seeing the beginning of this wave. Artificial intelligence is going to completely transform society the same way the popularization of the computer transforms society. I mean, I'm an old man. I got the gray hairs to prove it. I remember the days when most people did not work on a computer, when all the most advanced technology were dumb terminals connected to a mainframe in this cold computer centers. And most people were doing things on paper and pen. And then within about 10 years, maybe 15 years, there was a huge shift. And suddenly, anybody who worked in an office had a computer on their desk. Think about it. Maybe 40 years ago, that was almost unthinkable. Maybe 50 years ago, it was unthinkable. Relatively short amount of time, the computer has gotten integrated into almost every aspect of our life, from entertainment to healthcare, relationships, everything. Technology is everywhere. Embracing that takes flexibility. That's why children thrive at it, because children love to play with things. And when you're brought up with technology, you don't know any different and you just love it. And now the next big wave that we need to be flexible about is artificial intelligence. Now, I know a lot of people are concerned about it. I'm not saying it's all good or all bad. You know, we do need to be careful and mindful and conscious and approach it in an ethical manner. And there will always be those people who don't. So to be aware, to be grounded and realistic, that not everybody is going to use every advancement for the good of people. Some people are going to use it to cause harm. You know, until we wipe out selfishness on the planet, which I don't think is going to happen in the next several lifetimes, there's always going to be people using things for good and bad. Same thing, I always use the example like a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use a hammer to kill someone. Depends on who's holding it. But artificial intelligence is starting to sweep through, and learning to be flexible, learning to embrace this latest wave of change is going to be essential if we're going to adapt and thrive. May be able to survive by resisting it, but we're not going to thrive. And hey, do I know how it's going to affect your job, your life? Of course not. I'm not even sure how it's completely going to affect mine. I just know it is, and I'm learning about it and working with it and using it. But I'm not by any means an artificial intelligence expert. I don't know where this is all going. I've seen some hints, some clues. I just know it's something I need to be flexible about. So I could talk about flexibility for quite a long time. However, unfortunately, it is the end of our time together. So I'd be really curious to know, how has flexibility played out in your life? What has been a challenge for you to be flexible about, and how did you overcome that challenge? I would love to hear from you. You can email me at sam@theconsciousconsultant.com, or just post your comments on the live streams, even after the fact. I'll check them out and respond. So thank you all for showing up today. I truly appreciate you being out there listening to me ramble for an hour. I hope this was valuable. I hope this was worthwhile. I hope it maybe shifted how you view flexibility a bit and can find a way to serve you. I would love to know. All right, everyone. Listen, if you missed any part of today's show, you can always catch the replay on TalkRadio.nyc. And of course, you can always listen on all the major podcasting platforms, although there's starting to be less of them. Many of them have stopped or turned into something else. But Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora. Oh, Stitcher's not around anymore. Pandora, iHeartRadio. You can find us wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if there's a podcasting platform you love and you cannot find the Conscious Consultant Hour there, let me know and we'll make sure to remedy that situation. Thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget, coming up next, it's Dr. Richard Lewis Miller with his show, Mind, Body, Health, and Politics, followed later today at 5 p.m. Eastern with Frank Harrison in his show, Frank About Health. And of course, there's our Friday block of shows starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and our Tuesday block of shows starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you all next week.